All right, we are live.
All right, thank you. We are here for the Ad Hoc Committee to discuss the Mountainville Avenue property request from petitioner Eileen Mitchell. I am John Priola, the chair. Also committee members are Warren Levy and Roberto Alves. Corporation Counsel Les Pinter. Public Works Director Antonio Idarola. Director of Planning Sharon Calitro. And Park and Rec Director Nick Kaplanis. And the petitioner Eileen Mitchell. Also in attendance are ex officio council members, Councilman Santos, Visconti, Rotello, Perkins, and Mike Esposito. I think I have captured everybody. And so one of the things as City Council, we had asked the Planning Commission to review this and make a recommendation. And they did. The Planning Commission voted to give a positive recommendation to the this item. But I'm going to ask Les if you could just give us a quick review as to where we are, what this is all about, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and everybody. Good evening to all. So this comes under a cover letter that was sent to the City Council in October 28th of last year. And attached was a request from Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell at 19 Mountainville Avenue. And it's very short, so I'll just read the correspondence, and then at some point, maybe the chairman will open the floor for the petitioner. But the letter to the City Council says, "Dear City Council, as residents of 19 Mountainville Avenue for the last 40 plus years, we would like to petition the City of Danbury to own all of the property that we have maintained for the last 40 plus years. There is an 8 to 10 foot strip of land on our side of the fencing for Rogers Park that technically belongs to the city, but has been maintained by us since December of 1979. As per a conversation with Mr. Dean Esposito, we will incur the costs of a new survey or filing if required." That's the letter. So the request coming into the city is if property that they indicate they have used and maintained, even though it's not their property, it's city property apparently, according to a possible survey, that I think a new survey probably has to be obtained. They would like to know if they can acquire that property formally from the city, and they indicated they would take on the costs of related to that. As far as the Planning Commission's report, they did issue a positive recommendation. It's kind of a conditional recommendation, and you'll see if you see the report, there are 4 subset conditions in there, and they include the Director of Recreation's positive input, Public Works positive input, an updated survey, our office, Corporation Counsel's input, and other conditions. And then the final condition is all final documents and maps to be approved in form and content. So although it's a positive recommendation, it does have some stipulations with it. So anyway, that's the short but semi-full picture of this request to purchase this property from the city, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Pinter. Mrs. Mitchell, would you like to, as the petitioner, like to give us a little summary from your point of view?
Just we've owned the property. Well, we've maintained the property. I have a call into Cindy Rapp's office. They're supposed to come out and they know what's going on. They're going to come out and resurvey. It just, we've maintained it. It just would be nice to be able to own it, I guess. It's we've been taking care of it for the last 40 plus years. My husband's here also, by the way. He's so
sorry.
Hello,
Yeah,
Mr.
I mean, there's a jog in the property line, and when the city put the fence in,
they just made it straight.
they made it straight, obviously, instead of having a fence with 20 turns in it. Property adjacent was already transferred, that was also affected by the jog. So there will be, no downside to this except for the 8 or 10 foot section of property that is on our side of the fence now. Just trying to get things sorted out.
Could you tell me a little bit about, you said there was a previous transfer?
Well, I think both Kowaleski's and Aspasia's, previously it was Esposito's that had the, but that we're talking about the 60s, I think, because the fencing in the park was up when we moved in here. So, just the history of the neighborhood is there's been jogs in it and it's been taken care of. It's just everybody except us and 17 own all the way to the fence. We're the last two on the street that don't own to the fence. So that's all. Just trying to make it uniform.
Okay. Sharon, could you, you want to chime in here and maybe show us the map that you have? You're muted.
You're muted.
You're right, I am. I'm going to share the screen. Okay, everybody can see this. So here's the Mitchell's property outlined in yellow, and you can see the fence line on Rogers Park and how it jogs back in this area behind their house. So, and that occurs for the properties that are to the south as well. On the north, that it looks like they do follow it follows the property line or just inside the property line, which is what we normally tell property owners, including ourselves, to leave a couple of feet on the other side just in case you have to get to the backside to do any work. So the area in question is behind their house on the east side of their property, but on the west side of the fence line. So I would just say, and as we wrote up in their staff report and as was reviewed with the Planning Commission, that it's a interesting situation. We wanted to be sure that there were, for number one, no legal prohibitions about, because it is parkland, about transferring property, and we wanted some input from Public Works and the Director of Recreation. We would also want to ensure that the city maintained ownership of some feet over the property line should this move forward. So if we had to get to the other side, we wouldn't be walking on the Mitchell's property. But for the most part, I guess it's pretty self-explanatory. I just thought it might be helpful to see a picture.
Do you know on that map is the properties where there may have been a prior transfer that occurred showing?
I don't know. This is our existing map off our GIS system that might have occurred to the north of or just above on this picture. I don't know if you can see my arrow. Yeah, just it might have been on these properties. There may have been an area like it's fenced in here. I'm not 100% sure. You can see south of it that they have the same situation because the fence runs straight, right? They run. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the future those property owners came to the city, should this go through, about, purchasing their portion as well, that portion as well. But we should still maintain a little piece. Again, it is public parkland, so we don't on a regular basis like to release any of that. It serves a purpose, but unless we're going to move the fence line and jog it back, which I don't know what that necessarily, Nick would be able to give you some feedback on that. I don't know if that serves any purpose rather than, or I should say in the alternative of keeping the fence line straight all the way to the driveway. I don't know if that's going to happen or could happen or is the right thing to happen. Otherwise, we have this little piece of land that's more than probably what we need, but we should keep some of it as city land. You can see this is the driveway. This is the driveway into the backside of Rogers Park. This is field 4.
Right. That's field 4. That's the U13 field, right?
Correct. That is not the Westerners field, right? That's regular field for youth.
Thank you. Antonio, would you like to give us your comments?
Do you want me to leave this up or you want me to stop?
Yeah, Sharon, please leave it up because
Sure.
I I can use it as a reference point. So, Mr. Chairman, I also did a little research. I actually pulled survey maps for Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell's property, and there's looks like two property surveys, a map 12737 and a map 7465. And one of the things that I just want to clarify that you guys just sort of questioned, the north property lines of the parcels that you see, which is really the parcels towards the top of your screen. From everything I can see, going all the way back to the early 80s, that is their true property line. In other words, the fence line is right on what appears to be their property line, give or take a couple feet. So that I can just tell you seems to be the case going all the way back to the mid 80s and looking at this these maps. The parcel that Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell would like to actually purchase is that parcel to the right of what highlights their actual lot. And Sharon, you can just point to that right there, right in between the end parameter of what Sharon's got highlighted and the X's, which represent the fence line. And really what happened is when the field was perimeter fenced in, which we do with a lot of our fields, they'd made a straight line, which has now created this sliver of property, Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell's lot, and the next door neighbor. The actual next door neighbor has an even bigger parcel. And it's interesting. I think the maps I have represent this a little more accurately than our GIS, which is not uncommon. So, you know, for us, if the council, if the common council wishes to make this transaction and sell this property, we would want to reserve an easement over that property to not only maintain, but actually replace that fence line. And we will want the new property line to be just a couple feet off because you do want to have that wiggle room to not in the future install a new fence potentially on the property that you end up selling this property owner. I don't know if that makes sense, but you know, other than that, did a ton of research. The only other thing I want to tell you is it appears that the property owner has a structure right now on our property, which is currently being used. It might almost looks like a hoop tent, you know, for growing a garden, like a garden tent, which seems to be, you know, seems to be right on our property, which isn't shown on a GIS, but it's shown on some current mapping that I just took some snapshots of. So, Mr. Chairman, that's about the extent of my report, and I'll take any
Okay.
questions you guys may have, okay?
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any, well, I want to just get to Nick, the Park and Rec Director, Mr. Kaplanis. Do you have any comments that you'd like to share? Nick, are you
Can you
there?
hear me now? Okay.
Yes, yes.
You know, one way or the other, that doesn't materially affect anything that goes on with the ball fields down there. I'm surprised at how this is. When I first heard about this, I thought that all the properties all the way up through the other playing fields was the same situation. I didn't realize it was basically three properties that this is affected by. And I'm curious as to what the other neighbors think. You know, are they interested in doing the same thing as the Mitchells, or is it just the Mitchells that are looking to do this?
Can whoever that is, can you mute your phone?
Is that me?
That's Frank Salvatore.
I don't.
Well, you're good now, Nick.
Did you hear anything I said?
Yes, we did.
All right.
You were talking about the other property owners.
Yeah, I was surprised that, basically there's three other properties there that, are all pretty similar. It looks like, square footage wise, it's pretty similar, but, the way it's set up right now doesn't materially affect anything that goes on down at the park for, any activities that go on down there.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add one more thing.
Yes,
Um,
go ahead.
It's what our Park and Rec director mentioned is, I do want to tell you that this condition is a very common condition around a lot of our parks. Fence lines are always pretty much drawn straight. And I tell you, this probably exists on several parameter properties that line our parks, our fields. So I just want to put that on the record that this condition does exist quite a bit. This property owner is actually willing to buy the piece of property. Most people just end up using it and not even want to pay the taxes on it. But that's I just want to bring that up, that you may be opening up, if you will, Pandora's box here. You might bring awareness to this, and that's fine. But there may be multiple requests that may come in as people become more and more aware of this situation, and also become aware of the fact that the city is willing and able to sell property to make somebody's parcels a little bigger. Again, that's just for information. I just want to put that out there because it did, as Nick was speaking, it did remind me that this is a common issue with a lot of our, parks. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. Sharon, could you pull the map off for a second? Just so I can, there we go. Thank you. I'll go to the committee members. Councilman Levy, you have any questions for any of the personnel? You're muted. There you go.
Not at this time.
Okay, Councilman Alves. Do you have any
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any of the ex officio members that have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, Paul
Yes.
Rotello,
Yes, Mr. Rotello.
echoing the director's comments about the non-unusual aspect of having straight fences that are pulled back from property lines. I mean, take the dog park across the street from FedEx and Worcester School. That is a small, minuscule portion of the parcel that the city owns, and it backs up to houses on the top of the hill. I mean, we could spend the rest of our lives sawing off pieces of parks to accommodate well-meaning neighbors because of our fences. I mean, fences generally run straight. I think selling a piece of park, a well-earned piece of park, a park that's been part of Danbury's history for generations, requires an extraordinary level of requirement. And the fact that the abutters are already using the property and don't really have much of a reason to buy it except that they want it, to me does not rise to the level of, as someone mentioned earlier this evening, opening up this process to people across the city, whether it's Bear Mountain or the dog park or Highland Avenue or Terry Weil or anything like that. I think it's not as if we have a surfeit of open space in downtown Danbury that we can blithely just take off 10, 15 feet here and there, for no particular reason at all, except that somebody wants it. With all, due respect to the abutters and their needs and how they've maintained the property. They've gotten free use of the property for 40 years. I have no problem allowing them to continue with that use, but putting it down in a contract and selling it off so that future generations, for whatever particular needs they might have, would be denied from using that, to me seems an unacceptable level of accommodation It isn't really required in this instance. It's not a health issue. It's not a safety issue. It's not an emergency issue. It's not an access issue. We don't need to get vehicles in there. They don't need to get vehicles in there. You might want to use for parking or something like that. But again, this is public park, and we don't build them anymore. We can't really build anymore in downtown Danbury. Let's keep the acreage that we have. Rogers Park has suffered enough with the city making occasionally ill-informed decisions about placing public works facilities in their schools and things like that, and what should have been, in my opinion anyway, nothing but open space. I have no problem with these facilities, but locating them in a park is probably not the direction that I would go in, nor would I vote in favor of selling a parcel for anything except the most extraordinary circumstances. And to me, at this point, this does not rise to that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Rotella. Mr. Levy.
Yes, Paul brings out an interesting point and kind of joggles my memory. I had to do some research on the park some years ago, and I think I direct my through the chair to Corporation Council. The Rogers property was donated to us. Do we have the authority to give away a donation?
In order to answer that question with certainty through the chair, to Mr. Councilman Levy, in order to answer that question, we'd have to really do a deeper title search than we've been able to do. It's possible because donations of land, especially large tracts of land, especially open space land, many times come with restrictions or limitations. But the deed that I saw that went from Hart to the Mitchells does not seem to indicate any reference back to the original transfer, whenever that was in the 50s or whenever, but it's possible. Again, that's something that would come up if the council decided to transact this somehow, then that certainly would come up in the chain of title, and we would then have to advise that it would not be possible if that's the case.
Thank you.
Judge, are you done, Mr. Levy?
Yeah.
Yes, I did do quite a bit of history on we had prior to this people that wanted to utilize the land, and it goes back to the Rogers family did donate the property, and it was a PWA project to turn it into a park. So there was federal money involved in doing that, and I remember it from my looking at it that the Rogers family owed quite a bit in the way of taxes, so we encouraged them to donate the property. Just a little
Okay,
back.
thank you. I just want to point out or read from the letter from Attorney Pinter to the council back in October. In the first paragraph, it says an adjoining neighbor has or may similarly make an inquiry as well. So we're being noticed that if this were to go through, it's quite likely that one of the other neighbors has already made it known that they're interested in doing something similar. Any other? Councilman Perkins?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on what Councilman Levy and Councilman Rotella said, would this action lead to a public hearing? Would that be a requirement? Should this go forward?
Through the chair, yes, you have to have a public hearing.
One follow-up. Is there any other reason? I guess this would be to the petitioner or someone other than just to provide uniformity. Is there any other reasons why they are interested in this small little parcel of land?
Mrs. Mitchell, Mr. Mitchell?
Well, in the years we've lived here, there's been very little maintenance on the fence. They maintain the temporary fencing that went up in 1989. And by the way, this is not all Rogers Park. Half of this property was the Seeley Farm, which was my great-great-grandfather's property, which was donated to the city. I can give you a whole lot more history on this park that anybody here knows, okay? So anyway, I think that's why the jog is because our property is the edge of the Sealy property, which at one point was the Danbury Bethel dump, and I won't even go into that. Anyway, and when the city moved the Ives house, the Ives house was where Rogers Park is, junior middle school is now, and then they moved it again to where it is. That's another whole story. And Scott Phantom was going to make a beautiful walking trail, la, 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 so on and so forth. I'm sure you remember that, Mr. Levy. Anyway, a lot has gone on here. And in 87 or 89, when Mr. Ryerson put up the temporary baseball fencing that never came down again, that's when the whole park changed. But regardless of that, there's very little maintenance done to the fence in between the taxpayers and the park. And I think the last time I actually saw people out there string trimming was when Joey De Silva was doing it in between school for his summer job. Lately, they've been using a chemical on the fencing, and this year when they did it, they probably killed all the grass and everything 6 to 8 feet onto our side of the fence. And I just don't know if I want to take the time, energy, and finances to fix that if I don't own it. I mean, that's what started this thing in May of last year. They started spraying all the fencing and killing all the grass on our side. And I have an issue with the grass, and I have dogs, if you heard them before. You know, I just want to be able to maintain and take care of my critters and take care of my, if I'm going to put the money into it, I want to own it. That's all. And as far as I know, it's only the next house, 17 Mountainville, that doesn't own all the way to the fence. As far as I know, Roseanne and Roy Kovaleski think they own all the way to the fence. So even though your map shows otherwise, as far as I know, Ro and Roy both think they own all the way to the fence. So, that's all. If I'm going to put the time, energy, and money into fixing what's happened out there, I want to own it. That's all. Because the city hasn't maintained it. They do a wonderful job on the baseball fields and all the fencing there. But the fencing in between the taxpayers and nothing. And Freddie can attest to that. He also borders the park.
Councilman Perkins, did you get an answer?
No more questions. I yield. Thank you.
Is there anybody else?
Oops.
Okay. There's no more questions. Any motion? Roberto, I think you're muted.
Good. I want to make a motion to approve the sale or a positive recommendation as per the planning commission under the stipulations they put in there for us to continue bringing it to the council as a whole.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilman Alves. There's no second. All right, it appears there's no second to that motion. Motion to adjourn. Is there a motion? Warren or Roberto?
I would make a motion to postpone this meeting until we have further information on our legal right to dispose of the property. And also an assessor's evaluation of the property. So that I would like to adjourn this meeting for a postpone, come back at another time.
Okay. Councilman Alves? You're muted.
I can second to postpone it.
Thank you. So all those in favor of the motion to postpone?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion is
Mr.
is
Chair,
approved.
Mr. Chairman, just a question, a clarification. So
Yes,
that's basically a motion to continue. That's the intent of the committee, to continue until the information is returned. Thank you.
that's what I understand. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
So move.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Councilman Alves. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.